BRICS began as a simple idea. Large emerging economies, underrepresented in global institutions, pooling their influence to shape a more balanced world. But today, BRICS has clearly outgrown its original acronym, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and perhaps also its original imagination. Expansion and inclusion of Gulf countries like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, and others like Egypt and Ethiopia has made BRICS louder, broader, and more politically visible, but also more convoluted and complex. It has raised a new set of questions. Can a diverse coalition still deliver economic cooperation? Or is it just loud political rhetoric? Can it move from shared grievances to shared outcomes? And in a world tilting towards fragmentation, does BRICS really offer emerging economies a platform or a proving ground? Surrounded by these questions is India, which earlier this month assumed the position of BRICS chair. There are other questions too. Primary among them, how will India balance US defiance Russia and China while trying to maintain cordial relations with the US? Listen on, it's Thursday, the 15th of Jan. I'm Anirban Chowdhury. This is the Morning Brief. To understand what BRICS has become and what it can realistically achieve, I first spoke to Alicia García-Herrero, Chief Economist Asia Pacific at the investment bank Natixis. She's someone who has tracked BRICS from its early promise to its present complexity. Hi Alicia, very warm welcome to the Morning Brief podcast.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Let's talk about BRICS. I mean, what is your assessment of BRICS as it is today?
Yeah.
Is it a serious economic bloc, or is the politics around it and emanating from it louder, and not entirely consequential?
BRICS has become a very heterogeneous group. I actually don't think this is good news for India because before even South Africa became part of the BRICS, India was second in size, and you had Brazil, Russia. So India kind of was closer in a way to China's dominance because it was a smaller group. And then you had the New Development Bank at the time chaired by an Indian with the same amount of capital for India and China. So it was more balanced. As it expanded, China's kind of hub and spoke approach to the world, which is I lead and have all of these satellites, became more obvious in these expanded BRICS. The positive for China is that, of course, there's more clout, more countries want to join. But the negative, to your point, is that it is much less manageable, is it? I mean, what can you obtain with such an heterogeneous group of countries? The more the BRICS needs to react to geopolitical tensions, the more they might be divided depending on how those geopolitical tensions affect them. Therefore, I think it's less effective, if you ask me.
Understood. When you said that expanding the BRICS has made it more complex, has it sort of strengthened the grouping or does it weaken it?
When you think of the noise is louder.
Right.
Why? Because there are more countries. But beyond the noise, when you look at the actions, I don't see them to be stronger. I'm an economist, so let me give you things that I thought could happen. Free trade area, none. Not even a discussion. Arrangement for joint investments in projects, cross-border, you name it. I mean, these countries are even far from each other. There's no geographical linkage. So it is very hard to think of concrete proposals other than, of course, against something, against the dollar, against actions, but that's not constructive action. I'm talking about constructive action. Let's do something together. Where is it? I can't find it.
All right. So you clearly don't think that strategic autonomy inside the BRICS is possible today.
No, I believe that strategic autonomy is easier to achieve on a regional setting because geography matters for trade and for investment. So I actually think that it's much more likely that ASEAN as a group becomes more autonomous economically than the BRICS. Just they're two different, these countries. So I would say not really.
What about the strongest argument or the strongest noise that is emanating from BRICS, especially two countries in the BRICS, which is Russia and China, seems to be de-dollarization. Is it just an argument or is it action too? What do you think? How strong is it really?
De-dollarization is a trend that could happen with or without BRICS. So it's not a BRICS. BRICS may feel very comfortable with this term because it's an anti-Western, anti-US term. It makes sense. We've been with the dollar for too long. It sounds like a good argument if you ask me. Why depend on the dollar? The problem is that the reasons behind are different for Russia, sanctions, and trying to kind of avoid the sanctionable nature, if you want, of the dollar. And then China is really about full self-reliance. The only thing that China has left is the currency. It has a non-convertible currency that people do not want to use. So the only way for China to debunk the dollar is for the dollar to be debunked by itself. It's not going to be because of the RMB being highly convertible and extremely interesting. That's not the reason. It's only because the dollar falls. If the dollar is not used, that the RMB will have more chances. So the reasons are very different. I think for the others, no matter how much we may complain about the dollar, the question is, what about a world without the dollar, without any alternative? I'm sure many countries, including those pegged to the dollar in the Gulf, would probably say, oh my God, wait for little before we move there because it's inconvenient. Where is your peg? Who do you import stability from? This is very important for emerging economies. So maybe it's not the case of India. But as I said, de-dollarization is a major trend, but de-dollarization plus BRICS is a different story, and it has very specific objectives in the case of Russia and China.
Okay, let's come to India. What are the three things that India needs to be careful about when it's leading BRICS?
So India needs to be careful about China's overplaying BRICS because it's not useful for India. For me, India's best option is to play multipolarity in an Indian sense, not in a Chinese sense. When China and Russia talk about multipolarity, it's really a bipolar world. Russia becoming an annex of China, even if not expressed that way, but it's certainly not a third pole. You may say the European Union, but the European Union is a waning power. India is a rising power. So in that regard, India is the key for multipolarity in the world because it's the only power that can break the bipolarity of the world. And therefore, India has to fight for that.
Got it.
That means that BRICS is one of the options of multipolarity for India, not the option. So if I were India, I would play the BRICS in a very cool way, if I may say that. It's great to chair it, but you do not put all of your eggs in BRICS. Of course, don't put all of the eggs on the West either. That's not the point. It's India as India. India in the South Asia. India globally. It's multipolarity as such. That doesn't require to drive it through the BRICS because India is not really in the driving seat of the BRICS. That's why I'm saying this. So it should be very careful with believing it is. If you see, I don't think Indians do, but you know what I mean. We share this, great. But the world goes beyond the BRICS.
Now, chairmanship is ultimately about choices. With India now steering the agenda, what can we expect? What priorities has External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar outlined? How does India use BRICS to advance its own interests while managing China's scale, Russia's constraints, Western partnerships, and the expectations of new members? Former Ambassador Sanjay Bhattacharya joins me to unpack India's strategy. Sanjay was BRICS Sherpa 2020-21. Hi Sanjay, very warm welcome to the Morning Brief.
I'm delighted to be with you, Anirban.
Pleasure Sanjay. Okay, so India has assumed the chairmanship of BRICS. Let's start with what the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said yesterday in terms of outlining India's role. What would be his main focus, and how would it differ from Russia or China's agenda?
I think the essential point that Jaishankar made was that BRICS is for development. And through this, we also seek to have better global governance. Now, if you go back, BRICS was supposed to be a bridge between G7 and the EMDCs, the emerging markets and developing countries. But
Right.
what happened over time was that geopolitics changed. And Russia, which was, as you remember, originally in the G8, is now engaged in a war in Europe. And China, which was seen as a great hope for the West and became the manufacturing factory of the world, now seeks global hegemony. So there are these two counter narratives that have emerged about BRICS in the West. One being that it is anti West, and the second that it is for de dollarization. Both these are mostly in the US. But as you know, BRICS is something in which the decision making is based on consensus. And there is a very strong force in the current era of transformation that BRICS can bring to the table when we look at the world around us. And besides, I think the other thing that will have to be looked at is that besides the EMDCs, the global south is also looking up to BRICS for guidance. And so, with India in the chair, what we will be focusing on, and this is something that Jaishankar mentioned as well, is to focus on inclusive development, to look at integrating new members and partners, and consolidating the agenda on consensus within BRICS, and also to look at some of these counter narratives that are emerging, which are anti BRICS, so to say.
Okay, let's go to the balancing game that India has to do, balancing BRICS and the West. How does Jaishankar plan to do it?
It's going to be a delicate balance. But let's go back and remember that when Jim O'Neill had prepared his report on BRICS with the Goldman Sachs, he was actually asking the G7 to build bridges with EMDCs. And that's what was meant to be. It was not supposed to be BRICS versus the West. It was always meant to be BRICS and the West. And you remember in the early days, there was a G7 outreach, which eventually became the G20. And in some ways, I think that G7, BRICS, G20 will be the bridge that will work to look at greater, not just South-South cooperation, which is what BRICS would wish to do, but also to bring up collaboration with the West.
What about the China question? How can India credibly lead BRICS while it's locked in broader disputes with China?
I don't see this as a problem. As you know, Anirban, I used to be Sherpa for BRICS, and this was soon after Galwan. And this was not an issue because bilateral issues don't enter the BRICS discussion, don't enter the BRICS agenda, and it doesn't affect our cooperation. Bilateral issues are discussed separately, and particularly between mature systems like India and China, we have enough mechanisms to discuss these bilateral issues. And I'm happy that at a certain level, there is also some progress on these issues that you mentioned between India and China.
All right. Now let's come to the big question, which is the US. There is a bilateral trade which is hanging. We know what US thinks about certain countries in the BRICS, Russia, China, and now Iran also. Can India simultaneously lead BRICS and deepen its US partnership?
I think we have to understand that India is actually an emerging global power. And I say this not simply because India is the largest democracy and is today the fourth largest economy and the fastest growing, but also because of the kind of diplomacy that it conducts, the kind of options that it provides to the rest of the world, and the way people look at us in terms of representing them or, carrying their voice forward. And so India has a very unique role. And I think it would be very unfair to put a country which has strategic autonomy in its current avatar, an earlier non-alignment, as its major credo, to be seen as somebody who can be an ally of this or that, because that's not the way it's going to happen. And so I think what we do see is that India very comfortably can posit itself vis-a-vis a range of countries which may be opposed to one another. And that would be without problems.
And finally, beyond summits and statements, what concrete benefits do you think India can extract as chair?
The actual goals and the tangibles are yet to be announced. They're usually done after the first meeting of the Sherpas. But yesterday, Jaishankar announced the theme, which is building for resilience, innovation, cooperation, and sustainability, which are all very positive features, which will definitely be of help not only to the BRICS community of the members and partners, but also to the global south and the world at large. What is often not understood or recognized is that BRICS has actually been a very practical approach towards having discussions, having practical instruments and mechanisms that lead to improvements in trade and investment, digital transactions, better understanding between the people. And it has had tangible results which are there. If I were to kind of preempt what the Indian chairship is likely to say, first, it would focus on South-South cooperation, and the NDB would play a big role in that. The second thing that would happen is that the role of digital transactions, digital economy, technology and innovation would be given a big thrust. The third area where I think it will really work forward is in trying to establish new mechanisms, whether this is a center for AI for the global south, or I'm perhaps being ambitious, even a BRICS secretariat.
All right. Sanjay, on that positive note, thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome. It's been a pleasure.
So, BRICS today may not be a single-minded bloc, but it is a consequential forum. Its value lies less in replacing existing systems and more in widening the negotiating table. For India, chairing BRICS is an opportunity to demonstrate a distinct style of leadership, pragmatic, plural, and self-confident. But the real test is not whether BRICS can change the world, but whether India can shape it without being shaped by it. That's it for today. This episode was produced by Vinay Joshi, sound designed by Amrit Reggie. A new episode of The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts. Keep listening.